What is What If? Honestly, I'm not sure, or at least I haven't been this entire time. I think after episode 3, I may have figured it out. I mean, I know what If should be, because I'm familiar with the comic series that it's based on. I worked on a video with Owen from Owen Likes Comics. It's on his channel. I'll link it in the video description about how What If comics work, which ones in the past have been kind of my favorites, and what I'm expecting from a What If show. So What If, for people that aren't familiar, was a Marvel comic series that was started in the late 70s. The idea was to write stories that existed in parallel to the normal continuity that were more or less ideas that fans and the creators always wanted to see. They were almost completely separate, although a few characters and a bunch of ideas ended up making it over to the 616 universe. If you look at the first series of What If comics, you see so many things that eventually ended up happening. What if Spider-Man became part of the Fantastic Four? That's the Future Foundation. What if the Hulk had the intelligence of Bruce Banner? That happens all the time. What if the Avengers had never been? Jason Aaron just did a series called Heroes Reborn that was pretty much just that. What if Jane Foster found the Hammer of Thor? Jason Aaron's Thor run explained this, and this is going to be in Thor Love and Thunder. What if Spider-Man's clone survived? That eventually ended up being Ben Reilly. And of course, what if Gwen Stacy survived? I just can't imagine what that would be like. And that's only from the first volume. There have been something like 12 or 13 volumes of What If, and a lot of one-shots in the new Spider Shadow comic, so they have gone through a lot of ideas that have come through fruition. But that's the series. Some books are straight comics, some are sort of parodies, it's a mixed bag, and some are better than others. So I went into Marvel's What If, the show, with confused expectations. But there was one thing I really did not want them to do. I did not want them to connect. I wanted all of these stories and characters to exist independently of one another and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because then they could be risky. The episodes could conceivably end with the universe being destroyed, and wouldn't that be neat? Now, that does not appear to be the case here. It seems like these episodes are going to link up at some point. Characters will make a jump to a shared what-if reality, or who knows, maybe even the MCU. There are rumors, but that's a topic for another time. After all, this is its own thing, and I owe it to What If to judge What If based on what it is and not what I want it to be. Especially since, after all, I'm kind of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's first what-iffer. What if Spider-Man wasn't invited to fight in Civil War? What if Sharon Carter was working for Zemo? They're not what-if titles, but they, it's kind of the same idea. And 3 episodes into the show, What If is a lot. It is a lot to unpack. I honestly can't tell exactly how I feel about it, but I do want to talk about it because I sense the same confusion amongst my audience. I mean, according to this poll, the responses are largely positive, but all over the place. So let's dive right in. Spoilers for episodes 1, 2, and 3 of What If. Episode 1, What If Peggy Carter Was the First Avenger, certainly felt like a pilot. It had the difficult task of setting up the central conceit of the show, while also telling its own entertaining story, and on top of that, it introduced the most frequently requested what-if idea in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain Carter. So it had a lot on its shoulders, and it did some of those things very well. I think the animation was pretty incredible during the big action sequences. Movement was fluid and creative. The episode in particular utilized a lot of long takes, like this one, when she's fighting all the pilots, that would be really difficult to pull off in live action. So it's encouraging that the creative team is using animation to do things live action might not be able to do. The humor also felt pretty genuine most of the time. Lines like,
"I think I'm friends with him too."
Come on, Howard. We might need someone to push a button.
Felt like they would have fit right into the first Avenger. And conceptually, I enjoy the idea of Peggy becoming the super soldier. I always liked that character and appreciate that Haley Atwell really went for it. Some small issues. I'm not 100% on all of the faces, especially Bucky. Mostly because Sebastian Stan, who I love, may not translate super well. He's got a very understated vibe, so that usually doesn't lend itself to the exaggerated expression that come with animation. Like this line read,
"Who are you supposed to be? Queen of England?"
Which is a shame because you have the perfect schlocky action guy in Dum Dum Dugan played by Neil McDonough, who could absolutely make those lines sing. But I guess when you get Sebastian, you use Sebastian. Also, not to nitpick, not unlike my podcast, Mostly Nitpicking, which every so often I get a message from someone or tweet that says, I didn't even know you had a podcast. And I'm always like, really? Because I mention it in every video. So in case you didn't think this was like a real thing, I have a podcast called Mostly Nitpicking. You can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Every week, me and my friends DJ and Diggins pick apart whatever the week's movie or TV show is. So like Jungle Cruise, The Suicide Squad, whatever. Anyway, not to nitpick, what is this line?
What in heavens?
Like, what is going on here? Did they dunk Haley underwater for a second? I legitimately don't get it.
What in heavens?
But whatever. I would agree with the main criticism of the episode that there's some things that feel a little too samey for a what-if story. Like, this episode follows all of the story beats from the first Avenger while changing some of the details, but none that feel worthy of a full retelling of the story. I wish we saw clear differences. Perfect example. This scene, where she's on the plane, absolutely ruled. And the idea that Peggy rides the Hydra Stomper into battle is great. However, when Peggy ziplines onto the train, why doesn't she ride the Hydra Stomper onto the train? Even if the other guys zipline. And the answer seems to be, because that's what they did in the original movie, so Peggy does that too. I wish the series had a little more freedom to explore Peggy's character. How would she solve problems differently than Steve? We know she's a spy. Maybe we'd see a bit of that in play. Or sure, maybe Bucky can be a part of the group, but he does appear to be her second in command, and it makes more sense for Steve, but Peggy doesn't really know Bucky, and he doesn't have that much experience. Why not Dum Dum Dugan for Peggy, or Union Jack? Give her a completely different group of Howling Commandos. And I'm not necessarily trying to make the point that it's bad because it didn't do specific things that I wanted. It's just examples to illustrate a larger point. In general, I wish there was a little bit more characterization. Peggy making different choices that led to different results. Because choices are what if stories seem to really excel at. And also, not to nitpick, yada yada yada, I feel like they say the word dance way too many times in this episode. Like, we get it, dancing is code for dating, so maybe do that twice, not 4 times, especially over the course of a half hour. I don't know, also it's a metaphor we are already very familiar with from the original Captain America movies. But episode 1, not perfect, fun, by no means bad, it was just, pilot. But episode 2 is a little more complicated. 2 things about me right up front. The passing of Chadwick Boseman is a tragedy, and while maybe not the send-off the character deserved, this episode happened to be a lovely tribute to the character, and I don't want any of my criticism of the episode to eclipse that point. Seeing this episode that celebrates T'Challa features some really excellent voice work by Chadwick, it's very special. Yeah, I teared up a little bit. Second thing, Guardians 1 is one of my favorite Marvel movies, and probably my favorite standalone Marvel movie. I haven't seen Shang-Chi yet. I think it's as close to perfect blockbuster as any of these Marvel movies have ever been. It's funny, it's weird, and it has a ton of heart. I tear up at the end of that movie too, every time. And I don't want to say anything super negative about this episode because I think my issues are pretty specific and personal, but I will say this. I didn't love how they merged T'Challa into the Guardians universe. And I understand that I'm someone who for a living thinks about this stuff way too much. So if you watch the episode and we're like, it was fun, that's great. And here's my thing. I said this in the Owen Likes Comics video, but a what if story tells you essentially 2 stories. It gives you this alternate version, and implicit in that version is a take on the original. It functions like It's a Wonderful Life. The angel tells us what everything would be like if George Bailey didn't exist, which highlights what's great about George Bailey and why he matters. And in Peter Quill's case, the angel told us that if he didn't exist, everything would have been better. Objectively better. And yeah, sure. Ego did get Peter at the end of the episode, but still, I bet T'Challa and his Ravagers, which by that point would have probably also reformed Ronan and, Dormammu, would have been able to stop Ego because they're that great. Anyway, this episode kind of felt like one big dig at Peter. Like, yeah, stupid, that's how you fix the galaxy. What's wrong with you? Oh, you're really poorly adjusted since your dad ran out on you and you watched your mom slowly die of cancer before you were kidnapped and tormented by an alien who was way meaner when you met him than he was with T'Challa. That's all? Grow up, you man-child. I guess I identify with Peter so much that I couldn't not see that. I don't know. But yeah, I recognize most people probably think this episode's fine, and I'll admit, the big picture stuff, voice acting, pacing, a huge improvement over the first, and I like the heist story. I think it was a solid genre for the Guardian-centric episode. And I don't want to take anything away from T'Challa or Chadwick. I believe I would feel this way about any character who took Peter's place and made him look like a chump, especially if that character was incredibly wealthy and had what seems like the perfect childhood. And yes, maybe this is because I'm just another average white guy and I have internal biases. I don't think that's what's going on, but hey, I'm only human, who knows. But I left episode 2 with a strange feeling. And that was where I started asking, what is this? Like, what is What If? Because episode 1 felt like a very basic introduction to a character we would see more of in the future. Like, that felt like the point of that episode. Like the first Avenger was kind of homework for the original Avengers movie. Episode 2, however, felt like a more traditional comedy. Slick writing, silly faces, and a beautiful tribute to Chadwick Boseman. But for me, the story lacked some of the heart that Guardians 1 was able to build with its broken characters. It almost felt like a parody of Guardians 1, or whatever the Princess Bride is. Is Princess Bride like a parody? Not really, but that. And then there was episode 3. I hoped episode 3 would be different. You see, episode 1, introducing a character fans had been clamoring for, and episode 2, final performance of a beloved actor, those are some heavy expectations weighing on both episodes before you even see them. But we didn't know what episode 3 even was, so it had the freedom to be risky and dumb and fun. And everybody, I loved episode 3. Loved it. I thought the writing felt exactly like the 2010 Marvel movies. Humor totally worked for me, although I know it didn't for some. I loved the focus on Black Widow actually acting like a spy. I found her dynamic with Fury tons of fun. I think all the voice actors did a terrific job, including the ScarJo understudy, Lake Bell. And I think it had that sarcastic tone that a lot of the original Marvel movies had. It just felt right. Moreover, I felt like this episode was really free to take risks. Do things that made total sense in the moment but would never fly in the MCU. And the genre blending between blockbuster action comedy and spy murder mystery felt seamless. And now I finally get What If. Understand what is consistent about this series. There is not consistency. That is the consistency. It isn't like Loki or Falcon and Winter Soldier, where either you're down with the show from episode 1 or the show probably isn't for you. Every episode of What If might not be for everyone. They've certainly all shown a ton of premise in certain areas, and when it does commit to a lot of big ideas, for me, it's really fun. So I am enjoying it. I have faith in this show. So for that reason, I'm going to give Marvel's What If the classic IGN 8 out of 10. A little something for everybody. Just kidding, I don't do number reviews, so it's pretty good. I think you'll like it. And if you want to hear me talk about What If in more detail, I actually talked about this as part of my Patreon exclusive whiteboard series. So almost a year ago, I did a live stream where I went through 3 ideas for what ifs that could be done in the future. The first one was what if the other half survived the snap? The second one was what if Korg had enough pamphlets and took over Sakaar? And then the third one was the what if Justin Hammer took Iron Man's place in the MCU. They're all super fun. I may make them into videos at some point, but for now, if you want to watch that and all of my old streams and, see videos early, get your name up here. It's patreon.com/NandoViewMovies. You can even join our book club, where every month a couple of us get on a video call and we discuss a comic book or graphic novel or something that we all voted on. So this month, for the month of August, we did Secret Six by Gail Simone, which is kind of like the prototype for the modern Suicide Squad. It's very fun. I really look forward to these every month. Anyway, joining the Patreon is an incredibly helpful way to support the channel. Patreon.com/NandoViewMovies. Think about it. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Also, the podcast, which I mentioned, mostly nitpicking. We've done episodes about Free Guy and The Suicide Squad and Jungle Cruise and The Loki, and we're going to be doing ones on Shang-Chi and whatever other movies eventually get released this year. It's a lot of fun. You can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are at Nitpicking Pod on Twitter. Last thing, as always, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok. On all those platforms, I'm Nando V Movies. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.